This conference will now be recorded.
Coronavirus, COVID-19, and pursuant to Code 2.2-3708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body. And with that, I'll call the February 1st TAC meeting to order. Leah, could you go ahead and do a roll call?
Yes, surely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, TAC members. This is Leah Hill, and I will be taking roll call. At this time, you may take a moment to unmute your mics. I'll be calling both primary and alternate members for attendance purposes. If you have technical or volume issues, please just type your name into the chat box for our records. Chair Osiak has called the meeting to order, and his attendance has been noted. Please indicate your presence by saying here when your name is called. I'll continue with the localities, beginning with Stafford County. Mr. Bryan, Council. Mr. Jason Cowrie.
Here.
For Spotsylvania County, First Vice Chair Paul Yellow.
Here.
Mr. Rodney White.
Here.
Mr. Jacob Paswick. Mr. Leon Hughes. For the City of Fredericksburg, Mr. Eric Nelson. Mr. Bassam Amin. For VDOT, Ms. Michelle Shropshire. Here. Mr. Stephen Haynes.
Here.
Mr. Jim Ponticello. Mr. Dan Grinnell. For Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, PRTC, Dr. Bob Schneider.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Joe Stainsby. For Caroline County, Mr. Mike Finn. Mr. Craig Pennington. King George County, Mr. Nick Miner. Ms. Kimberly Wilson. For GW Ride Connect, Ms. Kate Gibson.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Linda Millsaps. Ms. Lee Anderson. For Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transit, DRPT, Sierra Williams.
Here.
Mr. Todd Horsley. For Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, Mr. Richard Duran.
Here. Good morning.
Thank you. For Virginia Railway Express, VRE, Ms. Sonali Soneji.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Christine Hefner. For Fredericksburg Regional Transit, Ms. Jamie Jackson.
Morning. Here.
Thank you. And Mr. Aiden Quirk.
Good morning. Here.
Thank you. Roll call and a quorum is present. Please put your mics back on mute unless recognized by the chairman to speak. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Leah. I guess with that, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 3, which is approval of the TAC agenda. Are there any last minute additions or deletions to the agenda by any members? All right, well, hearing none, I'll make a motion to approve the TAC agenda. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, consider the TAC agenda approved. Next will be item number 4, which is approval of the January 4th TAC meeting minutes. Again, does anybody have any additions, deletions, or edits regarding the meetings?
Hey, Alex, this is Paul from Spotsylvania. I had a comment. There was a note under the Lrtp basically last time that there was going to be a follow-up from Mr. Liu with Spotsylvania. There was also a similar request with Stafford. on some of the demographic information, and to date we haven't received that follow-up.
Hey, Paul, this is Adam with FAMPO. We did send out the data set that was used, I believe either today or a couple days after that meeting. So if there's anything further that you guys are looking for with any particular questions, just let me know and I can make sure that we get that coordinated.
Okay.
All right, well, hearing nothing else, I'll go ahead and make a motion to go ahead then approve the meeting minutes as written. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll consider the meeting minutes approved. Moving on to number 5, public comment. Stacy, I believe you haven't received any written public comments. Is there anyone from the public online currently who'd like to make a comment at this time? All right, well, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment period and move on to item number 6A, which is the TPB FAMPO Memorandum of Understanding. Ian?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You all probably know the history of this item. It's been back and forth between the TPB and FAMPO for quite some time. And the last draft of the document was approved at a previous policy committee meeting. Subsequently, the TPB has suggested some administrative edits to that document, which are tracked in the document that is in your pack, which I'm sure you've been able to have a look at. So most of these are just kind of shifting around paragraphs, reinserting an explanation of something, and that kind of amendment. Our staff has been through the document and the amendments with them, and we don't foresee any problem with any of these amendments. They are mostly just administrative in nature, but we bring them to the TAC for any of your comments, and we'll certainly take it through as well to the policy committee to see that they're happy with these amendments that have been brought back to us from the TPB. So I would take any comments. I've also got Adam here who knows the history of this document a little longer than I do, but we certainly need to present it to you and take any feedback from yourselves.
Ian, this is Michelle. Are we taking action on this today since it was just placed on the agenda at the end of last week?
My understanding is that we do need to agree or not agree to these amendments by the TPB because we're going to be presenting it to the policy committee. But I'll take comment from Adam if he thinks differently. I've come into this particular process quite late, so I've looked at the document in detail, but I don't know the history of it as well as the rest of our staff. So I don't know if Adam wants to make a particular comment, but my understanding is that we do need to agree to the amendments from the TPB that they've suggested that we bring about on the document.
Hey, Michelle, this is Adam. There's not necessarily a deadline here per se. We are asking for action in light of the fact that the policy committee did endorse the sort of latest draft back in September of 2020, and given the nature of these updates, we did not see them as substantive. So the TAC is not required to take action today, but that is what we are asking for.
Okay, VDOT, I don't know that I don't see anything that causes us a lot of pause. I don't know that Richard at FHWA has had time to look at these since the agenda came out in the afternoon of last Thursday. So I can't speak for him. He's on the line, but he might want a little bit of time to see if he has any comments.
If he is on the line, perhaps we could just ask if he has any comments or any concerns about the document.
Morning, this is Richard. I'm trying to remember, I've been looking at some other documents. When was this one sent out? To refresh my memory.
This version, Richard, of the track changes from the TPB staff that we received, this went out in our packet on Thursday that Michelle alluded to.
All right, found it. Yeah, I haven't had the chance to look at it thoroughly yet. I glanced at it, but not too thoroughly.
This is Jason. I've really just started looking at it this morning. I have not had a chance yet to get through all of it. One thing that kind of sticks out to me, I know our board was pretty specific about wanting to have the section about the separate CMP, or at least calling out that. This is under, let's see, Article 1B, congestion management process. I don't think that they're going to want to have that struck. I think it's purposely repetitive. I agree it's repetitive, but I think it was purposely done so. But I understand what you're saying, that maybe we need to go ahead and move this forward, Adam. I know what you mean there. I know they want to get back to this.
Yeah, I would offer too, Jason, that if the TAC wants more time with this, again, there's no hard and fast deadline that we've discussed with the TPB. So we had mentioned to them when they sent this over to us that we would get this on our February agendas. So again, if it's something where between VDOT or FHWA that we'd like some more time, we can spend this next month going through it and then put it back for action in March. That shouldn't cause any heartache on their side.
This is Kate. I think I would prefer to not take action today, give VDOT and FHWA time to comment, and maybe you still include this on the policy committee agenda, not as an action item, but just as an information item. And then that way we can bring it back in March and it's an action item and everyone has already seen this version.
Yeah, Kate, that's a good idea. And I think maybe in light of that, what I would ask for is any comments from TAC members before we put our policy committee packet out so we can include those comments. So in light of that, might ask for any comments from the TAC by, say, February 16th. So that should give everybody a good 2 weeks. And then we can include that with our policy committee packet.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Great. So then, Mr. Chair, I would suggest we just follow the suggestion of Adam that we, and Kate and others, that we ask people to send written comments to us, which we'll include in the policy committee agenda notes for our next policy committee meeting, and we'll bring it back for a final decision to this TAC a month from now, if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good game plan. So if everyone could just have their comments back in by February 16th, like you said, we'll incorporate that for the update to policy committee.
Great.
All right, well, I guess that kind of wraps up this item. We'll move on to 6B, which is an update on smart scale results. Matthew?
All right, thank you. So shown here, you all have probably seen these few tables, but they're just all of the projects in the Fredericksburg region. Score, benefit, cost, rank, and then Adam, if you scroll down to the next one. So on here are the ones that are slated to receive funding in blue. So FAMPO is slated to receive funding for 3 out of 4 submitted projects, totaling over $30 million. And GWC is slated to receive funding for 1 out of 4, totaling almost $10 million. These include the Route 208 operational multimodal improvements in Spotsylvania County, which will be awarded $7.7 million. Lafayette Boulevard multimodal improvements in Spotsylvania County in the city of Fredericksburg. This project will be awarded $11.7 million. I-95 exit 126 STARS study improvements in Spotsylvania County. This project will be awarded $10.8 million. And in Drpt, US 17 STARS improvements in Stafford County, which would be awarded $9.7 million. So our projects did particularly well with potential improvements in air quality, travel time reliability, reduction of crashes, and overall land use. But there are definitely areas of improvement, such as within the categories of accessibility and congestion mitigation. So next steps in the smart scale process, February to April, CTB board to develop potential revisions to staff recommended funding scenario. April to May, public hearings on the staff recommended funding scenario and any potential revisions. The May CTB meeting, the revised funding scenario is developed, and then the June CTB meeting, adoption of the 6-year improvement program for these projects. And we'd be happy to answer anybody's questions. Thank you.
Yeah, Matthew, this is Paul. So
Yep.
I had a question, like what's the process or a time frame to add basically recommended smart scale round 4 projects to the TIP in the CLRP?
I am unsure of that, but I would pass that off to Adam or Jordan, who have been working on the FAMPO TIP for the past year.
Hey, Paul, we haven't spoken with the district yet about the timing of the TIP amendments for some of these projects. So I would maybe offer that question to VDOT to see if there's any guidance yet from the central office around the timing of incorporating some of these new projects into the TIP.
These wouldn't be added until after the 6-year plan is approved.
Okay. And with the second part of that question with the CLRP, what would be the timing of that?
Are all of these in the CLRP currently? I thought they were all in. No. Then we might need to take action to do that sooner, but we can check on that.
Great.
All right, any other further comments regarding the smart scale results? All right, thank you very much, Matthew. I think overall as a region, we did pretty well. All right, next we'll move on to item 6C, which is the FAMPO CMAQ RSTP prioritization methodology update. I'll kind of kick things off and then kind of turn it over to Adam. I think there haven't really been any changes since we've last presented to the TAC committee, presented to FAMPO last month, and they seem to be agreeable to the changes. I don't know if we received any further comments from them. And with that, I'll kind of turn it over to Adam to kind of just give us a quick update.
Great, thanks, Alex. To your point, we have not received anything further since the policy committee meeting last Monday. So we did, of course, present updates on this methodology to all 3 committees last month. So we are seeking approval from the TAC this month. We did receive a few comments, though, from VDOT before the policy committee meeting. So instead of going back through all the slides this month, again, happy to take any questions on them. But we did add one slide at the end that we wanted to share with the group that VDOT had sent over on January 20th. And 2 of these comments in particular, I wanted to toss out to the group to see if there's any further discussion on these. And one is the first comment that's on page 5 of the methodology document, which is around the process, sort of having a better defined process within the methodology. And I know that at the TAC meeting last month, we talked about that being a little bit beyond the scope of what we were asked to do for this update. And I think from our staff perspective at this point, what we're looking to do as part of a broader strategy with project scoring is look at the updates that we're in the process of making to the Lrtp process, and then at some point within the next year to 18 months implementing a more substantial overhaul to the CMAQ and RSTP process. So with that in mind, we have not suggested to add any additional language at this point around the process for the call for project. But that being said, we did, of course, in our packet, and I'll go back to this slide in just a second, talk about what we're looking to do for the next few months for this year for FY 22-27 allocations. The other comment that I wanted to point out is on page 21. They asked about the bike PED scoring and noted that the total points are only assigned to projects that are wholly or partially within the TMA, and I believe that does include a 0.75 mile buffer as well, but we did not include a sliding scale. They're asking why, so that might be something for the group to discuss. We are certainly amenable to making changes to make that category a sliding scale, much in the way that we did for the PE studies category. And then finally, with the last comment here, talk about the idea of how projects that will be scored with this process are going to be scored differently than projects that have been scored in the roadway category to date, and how any project that's within a category is only scored against other projects in that category. So they're not scored across different categories. So we did include a disclaimer in the document that I just wanted to pull up briefly before I turn it over for any further questions. So we did include a note here to that end that any projects that are scored with this new process with the updates should be scored against each other, not projects from the past. So with that, wanted to see if the group had any thoughts on specifically any of these comments from VDOT that were raised, or anything else before we ask for action.
Yeah, Adam, this is Paul. I agree with VDOT on this in the page 6 comments. I think it would make sense to take that sentence out.
Okay, let me pull that back up, Paul, just so everybody knows what we're talking about there. Paul, are you suggesting both of these sentences be removed or just the second sentence there?
So I believe it's just the very last sentence, specifically to exploit the July sample meeting. If that's struck, I think it addresses the VDOT concern.
Okay. Yeah, well, that makes sense. I think that from our staff's perspective, we would be okay to remove that sentence. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that sentence in particular?
This is Alex with Stafford. I'm fine taking away that sentence to address the VDOT comment.
This is Michelle. That's fine with us. We appreciate you going through our comments and offering explanation. You know, as mentioned at the policy committee, I think Marcy mentioned, and we mentioned last time, and I know it's, you know, a little bit bigger endeavor than the subcommittee took on at this time, but we still, from our perspective, believe that it would be in the best interest at some point for a little bit larger revamp of the overall process to be looked at and maybe undertaken. I know statewide that some other MPOs are maybe looking at that as well. So there might be some other efforts around the state that can be piggybacked on, or you know, lessons learned from some other MPOs, both on the same kind of scale as FAMPO, the smaller ones and some of the larger ones. And we do feel like this is a worthwhile endeavor to take on sooner than later, and maybe not wait for that census data, because we feel like that's going to be sometime, you know, coming out before all that is finalized. But we're fine, you know, with the process that you guys have put forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And I would ask, maybe in light of that comment around the process, is VDOT comfortable sort of as a stopgap until we are able to put a more sort of comprehensive update to this process basically what we've spelled out on this slide as far as the timing and the process for this year. Is that something that VDOT would be agreeable with?
Certainly, that's fine. That looks reasonable. And you know, you have some other items listed in your document as you currently have for how the process works. So we'll, you know, be looking to follow those as well. But this looks fine. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the final point that I wanted to make before we can consider this for action is that at the March TAC meeting, so next month, I believe also on the 1st of the month, we will kick off the application intake, assuming this goes forward with the policy committee this month. So wanted to ask everyone to please start considering projects now. We are not intending to limit the number of applicants nor the number of applications. I think in light of the staff resources that we have, we would ask folks to limit it to 3 applications, but we're not going to make that a hard rule. Again, there's not a ton of explicit language to that end in our document, but we did want to provide for a little bit more flexibility than the process that was initiated in the fall. So with that being said, we don't have any further updates on this, but happy to take any other questions.
Yeah, Adam, this is Paul. I had just had a question with that. I know there was supposed to be a call for projects last fall. Would those projects still be in the mix for consideration, or are we kind of forgetting that and just we have kind of the new project applications for this call for projects?
Paul, that's a good question. I'll say for now, any projects that we received applications for, happy to consider those, of course. One thing that we are working on this month is some updates to the application forms so that we have a little bit more information to start with when we do the scoring process, so that, you know, we don't have to go back quite as much with the applicants to get data on the back end. So as long as we get the information that we're seeking with the updated application form to better reflect the methodology, that should not be an issue.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there's no more further comments on the prioritization methodology, taking into account the recent change we just made, deleting the sentence about the call for projects in July, I'd like to go ahead and make a call for approval with that modification.
This is Paul, motion to approve.
Second.
All right, I'll second that. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Are there any opposed? All right, we'll consider that one approved and recommend that to the policy committee with that one change as recommended by Paul. And I'll take us on to item 6D, which is the 2050 Lrtp update. Ian?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We just want to update the TAC and also the policy committee later in the month on where we are as an overall view of the Lrtp update. So we're looking today just to talk about the schedule, the project prioritization, what we're doing with scenario planning and modeling, and the near-term steps involved in this process. So just as background, you know, the 2045 Lrtp was approved in April 2018.
Hey.
Sorry, what was that?
Be careful.
Mr. Chair, could we just ask everybody who's not speaking currently to just put their mics on mute? Great. So MPOs are supposed to update their metropolitan transportation plans every 5 years. So that means that for our 2050 update, the final ultimate deadline is April 2023. We're proposing to slightly slow the 2050 Lrtp process down because we don't have a tight deadline other than the deadline we imposed on ourselves for December 2021 to complete this project. We are asking that for two reasons. We want to do a thorough process of bringing to yourselves and the policy committee an updated prioritization system. And we want to have a closer look at the scenario planning chapter in our LRTP plan. You'll remember last month we spoke about the fact that we're not going to change the structure of the LRTP for 2050, keeping the chapter systems quite similar to last time. But we do want to look at the scenario planning chapter in a little more detail, and we do want to bring you the complete project prioritization methodology before we start calling for projects. That will mean a slight delay in the call for projects for the 2050 LRTP, which will mean we'll overshoot the December 31st deadline somewhat. I don't anticipate a large delay, but we want to do the prioritization system properly, because if we rush that in order to call for projects to fit with the December deadline, you may not be happy with the results, and we'd rather do a proper job of the prioritization methodology. In your pack today, the first proposal for the roads prioritization is going to be presented, and we'll discuss through that. No decision is asked for today. We're showing you a work in process, and I'd like to use that methodology in future, that instead of focusing on the December 31st deadline, we focus on where we are with each component of the LRTP and bring regular updates to the TAC, regular updates to the policy committee for each piece of the puzzle, so that we show regular progress on the items, but we don't specifically keep this hard deadline of December the 31st, so that we have a little more flexibility. The highway project prioritization was adopted in 2008, and we've seen some factors happen since 2008. In 2016, we had some changes that we needed to take note of. The existing methodology that was used for the previous update of the LRTP doesn't fully reflect the smart scale evaluation measures, and we wanted to relook at those. Performance measures and targets were not addressed as well as we'd like, and we would like to look, as I said, at some modeling which is currently outside of our own staff capabilities. We don't have expertise in modeling in-house, and we have to use outside consultants. And we want to just look at the evaluation methodology for projects to try to make those a little more objective than subjective. Next slide. For transit and TDM projects that were prioritized in the 2045 update, there was no out-of-the-box scoring methodology that was used, and we'd like to have another look at the scoring methodology for transit. For bike and ped projects, these were prioritized by staff using CMAC processes and qualitative measures. We want to just have another look at that. And so we're proposing to develop a clear, simple, objective prioritization methodology for each project type and roll them out month by month as we go through 2021 until you are all happy with each of those and the policy committee is happy with that. And we've tried to be objective. We've tried to look at how the scoring here affects the scoring in the other processes, so that it has a connection with the other processes and not seen as this completely standalone thing, which doesn't really work for smart scale and other methodologies. So when we look at the scenario planning, Cambridge Systematics is developing 3 essential scenarios which relate to the project list. We've also discovered that VDOT has a modeling team that has developed a model for our FAMPO region and also for the GWRC area. And we want to ask them to do some additional modeling for us for the chapter on scenario planning, looking at alternative population growth patterns, local versus distant employment growth. There's some work done by the GWRC to bring jobs locally, but there's a trend in our region to have so many of the jobs based in Northern Virginia, DC, and so on. So we want to model what happens if any of that changes. And then increased interregional multimodal transportation options. What happens if we change the transit options or related matters? We know that VRE are bringing substantial changes to the rail line. We know that there's new leadership at Fred, and they may bring some changes. What could that possibly do to affect our future transportation environment in the Fampo region? We want to use these scenarios to revise and update the Lrtp Chapter 4. Next slide. So, staff have recommended updated goals and objectives based on the public feedback, and we're presenting these to committees for action in February. We have a draft set of evaluation criteria for scoring only the roadway projects at this stage, and that we're going to talk through later on in this meeting. The revenues, we're asking for submission by the end of Feb 24. Staff is available to answer questions. We can set up meetings to go over the detail. And we're building a regional project database to identify and track projects in the FAMPO documents. Staff will continue to provide milestone updates, as I said earlier, on a regular basis to the FAMPO committees on what we're doing with each of these steps. So, Mr. Chair, that said, what we're aiming for here is to move away from the focus on specifically rushing to get to the December 31st deadline, and we're shifting to a focus that is specifically taking each block of the process, presenting it to the committees of FAMPO, getting approval, changes, amendments for that block, and then building the LRTP together as a process. And we think that we'll then get the items in order. We'll approve the prioritization methodologies first for each type. We'll then call for the projects. We'll then have Cambridge Systematics model the impact of those projects. We'll do the modeling for the scenario planning chapter, and we will then do the process for the rest of the documents. And we think that's going to give us a better process than rushing the prioritization methodology now in order to just keep on with deadlines that are really self-imposed. We decided as FAMPO to have the 31st of December as the deadline, and I'm saying let's just remove that deadline and focus on doing a proper job of each of the blocks. And we'll take your questions if you have them.
Yeah, Ian. This is a Paul Yellow. I just wanted to make the point that one of the reasons why...
Sorry, we're having two... Paul, sorry to interrupt, but we're having your voice on two different platforms, both from your computer and from, I don't know, I think it could be a telephone.
Okay, it should be okay now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, much better.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Okay. The reason for the quicker time frame was driven by the fiscal constraint concern. Basically, the issue was with the 2045 CLRP, the VDOT revenue estimates were very conservative. And the issue is with recent rounds of smart scale, FAMPO has outperformed those revenue forecasts. So as a result, what happens is basically kind of, if you think of the CLRP is basically kind of like a salary cap for transportation projects. For the near-term years, basically we're above kind of that salary cap, which pushes basically projects back. And the concern was basically given the recent FAMPO successes, that projects would actually need to come out of the CLRP. So the thinking with going to basically 2050 was to get another 5 years of fiscal constraints to try to prevent that from happening. Now, one question I have is basically with the VDOT revenue forecasts that have come in for 2050, how do those compare with 2045? I'll say if they're about the same or less, that could lead to projects coming out of the CLRP.
Seeing as we have VDOT in the room, does VDOT want to make any comment on that particular question?
Well, I guess we just have to wait and see where these revenues fall. I mean, that's always the possibility, though, that if the revenues are down and your project list is still higher, then there is a chance that projects would have to be deleted from the list. But I think we managed some of that last time with we ended up not having to take projects out. With the last update, correct?
Correct. This is Adam.
So we had some leeway with the FedEx project at the end with the concessionaire funds.
Right. Paul, we did receive back, I want to say it was actually the day of the last TAC meeting, so January 4th, the projected revenues for FY21 to 2050 from VDOT. So I have the year-by-year breakdown. I don't have a summary of what the difference is from the last time we got the revenue forecast from VDOT, but I can say that for FY21 to 25, 3 of those 5 years go down. So FY21, it's about $16 million less. FY25, the second highest difference is about $12 million less. But then starting in FY26 all the way out to 2050, there's a pretty substantial improvement in funding based on the 2021 numbers compared to the 2018. So for instance, I'm just picking a year here. When we get out to 2040, there's a $31 million increase in funding. So over the course of the entire planning horizon for the document, we're looking at substantially more funding. But in the near term, it appears to be somewhere, kind of eyeballing this, about a $35 million deficit from FY21 to 25 compared to the last forecast.
So would it be possible for the next TAC meeting on March 1st do a comparison between basically the old VDOT estimates and the new ones for kind of 21 to 2045 by year, to have some summaries kind of on that? Because I'll say if there's an issue with the fiscal constraint, that's something we would have to address just to keep projects moving. And I guess from our perspective, we're most concerned about projects that are, let's say, going out to about 2030.
Sure, Paul, we can have that in the packet for next month.
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie Jackson. I would just say too, in this process, and thanks for the presentation, and I would just say, looking at the projects that will go into the LRTP, and also, as Paul mentioned, just being a fiscally constrained plan. Usually in this process, I think it'll ultimately, and I won't say balance out because that's not really what I mean, but I'm saying more when we go through the process of evaluating projects, even those submitted from all of the member jurisdictions and all of the agencies that are on this call today, we're going to have to evaluate even if they meet kind of the guidance for the LRTP anyway. So some of that may, for lack of a better term, kick projects out because they may not mirror the goals of the region. So I probably at this point, until projects are identified and vetted, we would be working a little bit backwards if we tried to, even though we need to do it in tandem, but the fiscally constrained plan will come after the evaluation of projects just to make sure that they meet the goals of the LRTP. So I think the process that has been outlined for me makes sense. And then, that fiscal constraint piece, will be evaluated as we make sure that the projects meet the objectives of the LRTP. So I'll just put that out there for the group because they will still need to be evaluated to make sure that they meet the goals. And then that fiscal constraint process, when we're doing the evaluation of projects and ranking of projects, et cetera, those projects will shake out as well because everything probably will not be included anyway. That's all.
This is Ian again. I would like to also just point out that because of some technical things that have happened in the interim, we are likely to need a 2045 LRTP update during the course of this year. and that may also give us a little wiggle room to adjust for project-specific items that we may need to deal with during that process as well. So we're looking at just not rushing the 2050 LRTP and providing for an update of the 2045 LRTP during the year.
So Ian, this is Paul again. What would be the time frame for the CLRP amendment for the 2045?
Adam, can you give us input on that? I'm not actually sure what the exact timeline is.
I think that would go to the question that was asked of VDOT during the Smart Field presentation. We would want to make sure that the timing lines up with the implementation of the next 6-year plan, so we can work with VDOT, Paul, to determine what that timeline needs to be with the TAC, but probably sooner than later we need to start thinking about getting that on the TAC agenda.
Sounds good.
With that, Mr. Chair, I think it's over to you.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ian. I think these updates are going to be necessary, and so far it looks like we're heading in the right direction. So I think we'll just keep continuing along. And then with that, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to the 2050 LRTP goals and objectives for Stacy's presentation.
Yes, good morning. So we wrapped up the phase 1 public outreach, which was to bring the public into the process of developing the goals and objectives for the 2050 LRTP. Next slide, please, Adam. So the importance of these goals and objectives, first, as most of you all know, we need to have goals and objectives included in the 2050 LRTP. And just to be very clear, these goals and objectives convey what the region wants to accomplish by the year 2050 and the steps that we need to take to achieve these goals. We had some comments on our online survey saying that some of these goals and objectives aren't necessarily applicable to FAMPO. So I want to be clear that these goals and objectives are for the region as a whole. And they are intended to guide the work of everyone involved in the region's transportation system. And after these goals are adopted, staff and stakeholders, of course, need to develop strategies and measures. Next slide, please. So we brought the public into the planning process through an online survey. We developed this online survey with feedback from CTAC and TAC members who wish to participate. And our goal was to make sure that the survey would allow the public to meaningfully participate, but that it also would produce useful public feedback for staff, for TAC, for policy. And how did we develop this survey? Well, as I said, we used CTAC and TAC input. We started from the baseline goals and objectives that we pulled out from the 2045 LRTP. Adam, can you scroll down a bit? I can't see that last, nope, that slide, but maybe I need to zoom out. Okay, I can see it now, thanks. And survey participants were asked to provide feedback on those baseline goals that we pulled out of the 2045 LRTP, as well as TAC and CTAC feedback. And we asked them to indicate their level of support and provide written comments. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we distributed the survey in a variety of ways. We had 2 different in-person events at Fred main terminal, where we spoke with 46 riders and drivers. You can see on your screen the snacks there. They are labeled with directions on how to take the survey. Those are quite popular. And the other image on your screen is a flyer that you may have seen around town. We worked with downtown cafes and breweries to get these up, and they had little tear and take directions or the QR codes, as you can see. We also, of course, had social media ads, posts, and we did some live stream with FAMPO planners. We also did a live stream with HG AAA transportation trainer Tamara Banks. And VRE helped us get the word out through their newsletter and websites. We also sent mass emails out to our lists, 477 to be specific, and we followed up with reminder emails. Next slide, please. Oh, level of survey participation. We did really well given the nature and the topic of this survey. So we had over 670 views. Of those, 34% took the survey, which resulted in 230 partial and complete responses. And people really took a great deal of time to give us feedback. They spent over 13 minutes on average, providing about 400 written comments. So we may have had about 230, but those people really took the time to give us some great feedback. And one of the questions we asked on the survey was how well they felt that the survey allowed them to give meaningful feedback. And I'm happy to say that most people gave us 4 or 5 stars out of a scale of 1 to 5. Next slide, please. So we took all of these comments as well as other data, and in a nutshell, what we did was staff looked at the level of public support for each goal and objectives. We categorized and lined those 400 written comments, and then we adjusted the wording of the goals and objectives accordingly. Next slide, please. So here are the highlights of public sentiment. You should have received the full report in your packet, but I just wanted to bring your attention to these most important ones. We received a lot of feedback saying that decision makers must really strive for regional cooperation and have productive communication in order to achieve any goals and objectives. We also had a strong response that the region needs a convenient, interconnected, and multimodal transportation system. The multimodal interconnection was quite popular feedbacks in this survey. There was a great deal of support for expanding and improving passenger rail and Fred bus service. And survey participants really asked us to strive to have innovative ideas to solve congestion, including physical modifications. There were several proposed suggestions on new roadways and things like that. But we also had comments asking to ramp up TDM strategies. And finally, oh, yes, on the slide, thanks. And finally, I'll bring your attention to the fact that we had a lot of comments asking for cooperation among those who plan for land use and those who plan for transportation projects. There was some concern that they don't always complement each other. Next slide. So I'm not going to go into all the objectives that we created for all of these goals, but there are 7 goals, as you can see on your screen here. And again, you have these in your packet, your agenda packet, in the survey report. What we're asking you to do today is to endorse these. We would like to bring them to the policy committee this month for approval. And is that the last slide, Adam?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And so I'm happy to take any questions now. As I said, I won't run through every single goal or objective. We just don't have time for that, but go ahead and ask your questions if you have any.
All right, well, hearing no questions, Stacy, thank you very much for that presentation and update. And I guess we'll go ahead and move on to some more details on the proposed roadway prioritization methodology update. Adam?
Hey, Mr. Chair, I think we do want to make endorsing the goals and objectives an action item, I believe.
Sorry, yeah, I just saw that as an action item there. All right,
Do you still have Stacy on the line?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right, I'll go ahead and make a motion then to approve the regional goals and objectives for the 2050 LRTP.
Jamie Jackson, second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, goals and objectives are approved. Adam, I think now we can move into the prioritization update.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Go ahead and pull the slides up. All right, so today we wanted to provide an introductory overview of where we are looking to go with our roadway scoring methodology. I'll point out that before we get kind of into the weeds here a little bit is what we have developed so far we're seeing as a baseline. We're hoping to build upon that with comments and feedback from our committees, including the TAC. So the topics today that I wanted to go over are what we're trying to achieve with this, as well as the process to do so, go over some of the draft scoring evaluation measures, some hurdles that we've identified to date, as well as some next steps that we're going to be looking to tackle. So as far as the objectives, what we're looking to do is implement a new prioritization methodology for the roadway project in the Fampo region. Ian talked a little bit earlier about some of the needs to do so. So we kind of have three guiding principles that we've developed as a team internally that we wanted to share with the group. We wanted to use smart scale measures, federal planning factors, and Fampo's regional performance measures and targets to guide the development of this new process. We also wanted to use readily available data and tools to evaluate the project's merit combined with some qualitative factors as well. And then lastly, we've talked about this a little bit with the CMAQ and STBG process over time with the TAC, but we wanted to use clear, transparent, and objective scoring criteria where possible. As far as the process, part of what got us to this point is that as we were doing some research with the CMAQ and STBG subcommittee, staff met with MPO counterparts across the state, and many of them suggested first tackling an overhaul of the Lrtp process before attempting to do anything substantive with the CMAQ and STBG process. So that's why we're here today with this topic. This is a task in the FY21 UPWP that Fampo has approved. And then lastly, many MPOs across the state, as we learned at the last quarterly coordination meeting with other MPOs, are doing very similar work right now with their scoring process for the Lrtp to better align with smart scale. So the first step that we're proposing to sort of lay out here with the roadway prioritization methodology is to tackle this one first. And then until this is complete, staff will continue to use the existing methodology for scoring roadway capacity projects and in the next round of the CMAQ and STBG call for projects, which again will start next month. After we finish the roadway process, we're going to shift our focus to transit and TDM, followed by bike ped, and then studies after that. So once all four have been approved, like Ian mentioned earlier, we will reissue the 2050 call for projects. So we're not giving ourselves at this point a deadline. We're still working out some tentative dates internally. And then finally, the updated methodologies can be utilized and modified as necessary in the future to score other projects for the annual CMAQ STBG allocation process. So that is an idea that we got from Hampton Roads as we met with them a couple times late in 2020. As far as the scoring evaluation measures, what we're proposing is to utilize the 6 smart scale measures, a statewide coordination measure to ensure that what the region is trying to do is in alignment with what the state has identified as needs, and then a project benefit measure. As far as smart scale, those scoring measures, we did condense and simplify those quite a bit given the time and resources that are available to us as a team. And then while the scoring process for smart scale has project benefit built in, this proposed methodology assesses a project's benefit independently and uses some qualitative factors. So we'll get into that here in just a moment. This is a quick breakdown of what we have been working on, again, internally. So we're looking at using the 6 SMART scale measures as 60% of a project score following the weighting typology B, which is what the FAMPO region uses, and successfully here recently. A statewide coordination measure that would be 10%, and then a project benefit measure that would be 30% of a project's overall score. So the next few slides go into detail as far as what we're looking to do and what factors we'd be applying to the projects. I'm not going to go line by line here at this point. Again, we just wanted to provide kind of an introductory overview today. And happy to take some questions on these. But again, these are our attempts to simplify again and condense what SMART scale is looking to measure for these 6 different categories between safety, congestion mitigation, so on and so forth. So just going to scroll through these slides and talk briefly about each one. Part of what we're trying to do with safety is look at the way that VDOT has identified in the past the PSI locations, the nodes and the segments. So those are potential safety improvements. And then there's also a data set that we have easy access to via VDOT's Pathways for Planning portal, where we can look at the weighted crashes that look at the equivalent property damage only. So that's where if it's a property damage only crash, it would count as 1. If it has an injury, it counts as 33. And then I want to say if it has a fatality, it counts as something like 567. And that's based on FHWA guidance. As far as congestion mitigation, the 2 factors here would be looking at the current volume to capacity ratio and the current level of service. So what this does and how this changes a little bit from the existing methodology that we have on the books is it doesn't require us to do any modeling to see what would happen if the project was implemented. So it's quite simplified, but it's, again, clear and objective and uses data that we have readily available to us. As far as accessibility, we look at the multimodal component of the project. So just a simple yes, no, does it have a multimodal component? Is it beyond just a roadway project? We also look at the connections to other types of modes. So whether that's a train station or parking ride lot, a bus stop, or even just a trail and sidewalk. And then, of course, we also wanted to look at environmental justice populations and see what type of impact the project would have on those populations. For environmental quality, we look at where the project is located and we see if it's in or near a protected area, and then we total up the square mileage of that protected area that's within a half mile of the proposed improvement. So that's what makes up the environmental quality measure. For economic development, we look at 3 different factors. One is there's a data set that the VEDP, the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, maintains as far as sites across the state. So we'd be looking at the number of sites within a mile of the improvement for better access to that potential site. We look at local land use as well as whether or not the project is on the freight network. Next, for land use coordination, this one is pretty simple and could use a little bit of workshopping, I think, but this basically looks at the current population and jobs within 1 mile of the proposed improvement, in addition to the 2050 jobs and population within 1 mile of the improvement. For statewide coordination, we look at the VTrans data that's been developed over the last few years. And the first thing, and this is a SMART scale requirement, is does the project meet a VTrans need? It's a simple yes, no, and makes up half of the statewide coordination score. And then the prioritized needs that are currently in draft form, I don't believe that they've been approved by the CTB to date. We'd be looking at the district needs that have been prioritized and then the statewide needs as well. So we look at how well a project aligns with those. And then lastly, we have project benefit. And so this is where we bring in a few qualitative factors, but there's 4 primary things that we'd be looking to see if a project achieves. So one is a simple yes, no, is the project, is it recommended in a study? So we, for all 4 of these, we look at sort of the extent to which project aligns with these. Second one is improvement impact. So we look at what is the project trying to achieve and how well do we think it does so. Third is regional benefit. So we look at how well it answers one of the 4 questions there in the measure description column. And again, provide a score out of 10 with a written justification. And then lastly, does it meet these strategic goals that have been approved by Lrtp? So the goals that you just heard Stacy mention in the last presentation, we'd be looking at how well the project aligns with those goals. Did want to talk about a few potential hurdles that we have talked about internally to date. The first is it's pretty difficult to objectively measure a direct project benefit without complex calculations and access to certain tools and data sets. So if you're making a roadway improvement without getting into modeling, really, it's difficult to essentially replicate what SmartScale is doing with all of the complex sort of variables that they tie into their scoring process. Many projects in Lrtp and those that will be proposed to be added to Lrtp are conceptual in nature. So if this is sort of an out-year project, we might not have all the details that we would like in order to use the scoring process. Some of the projects on the current highway bike ped constrained list are not typical roadway improvements, so it's hard to judge and measure certain project types. Fourth item here is that by the time mid and out year projects apply for funding or become funded, project elements tend to change, right? So we all know that from SmartScale. So if a locality, for instance, combines a transit improvement with a roadway improvement, the way that we scored that roadway improvement is going to be a little bit different from how the project actually gets implemented in the real world. It'll also need to be determined whether project costs should be a factor in scoring. So keeping in mind that this is for the Lrtp process and not specifically for SmartScale, which is sort of a mid-term type process where the funding would be in the next 6, 7, 8 years. This is something where there's a number of proposed improvements or committed projects right now that are pretty costly, and they would never, well, it's unlikely that they'd be applied for via SmartScale based on some of the changes that FAMPO has made over the last few years. Some projects may need to be exceptions. So if there's projects that are on the SGR list, those might not need to go through the scoring process because they're more maintenance projects in nature. And then finally, this new methodology could be used to evaluate all possible projects or just those that are new applications for the 2050 plan. So if that were done, we would leave the 2045 projects on the list, assuming that revenues and expenditures line up. So again, those are some hurdles that we have identified to date with our team. As far as next steps, again, this is just sort of a baseline overview of where we are to date. This isn't something that we're going to be asking for action on this month or next, but we are asking for review and feedback. And then staff will continue testing existing projects with the scoring process sort of as a proof of concept. And then now that we have the SmartScale scores from round 4, we will also test some of the SmartScale projects within our region to see how closely they align with SmartScale results with the tool that we have developed. So with that, again, a relatively high level overview of kind of where we are with the roadway process to date. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Adam, this is Paul. I had a couple of questions. One is I was wondering if this could be the big data that the state uses for SmartScale, if that's available to FAMPO. That's one question. And then I guess the second question, just kind of about the lift just for the FAMPO staff to do this type of analysis. I know that Central Shenandoah kind of that is in charge of Harrisonburg and Stanton Waynesboro, they've developed a methodology that kind of does this, which their staff can do. And they have fewer staff resources than FAMPO. So my question is, do you have what they've done, and have you been able to draw on that for the effort you're doing now?
Hey, Paul, this is Adam. 2 good questions there. To your first one, we have not contacted the team at OIP yet to see if we could utilize some of their tools. I think part of why we haven't done that yet is that even if those resources were available, it's still, based on reading the technical guidance, appears to be a pretty time-intensive process that might get us out of keeping this a relatively clear and simple scoring process. But we can certainly reach out to see if we could use some of those tools and resources that they have available to see if we can use those for what we're developing. And then as far as what Central Shenandoah is doing, they were one of the MPOs to present what they've been working on. We have not contacted them, Paul, but we based on what they presented at the last quarterly coordination meeting, are doing a very similar effort. So we noticed that the way that they're trying to essentially simplify what SmartScale does is pretty much one-to-one with what we're trying to do. But that would be a good idea for us to contact them and sort of compare notes, if you will. So thank you.
So Adam, this is Michelle. Just as you mentioned, a lot of the projects in the LRTP are more conceptual in nature and are not going to have as much data, if you will, for this scoring process. So how do you propose going about to get that for some of these?
Yeah, that's a good question, Michelle. That's one of the things that we've been going sort of back and forth about. I think part of what we attempted to do is you'll notice that many of the draft measures are simply location-based. So they're not necessarily measuring the overall benefit that project would provide if implemented, but it's looking at what are the current conditions. So regardless of how conceptual a project may be at the time of application to be considered for LRTP, we could still use many of these tools. So that I think is part of the answer, but to your point, it's one of those things that, by the time it's, 2042 and one of these projects is implemented, it's going to look probably drastically different. And I think that's just one of the realities we have to contend with a little bit. But that is something that, we would want to make sure on the project application form, for instance, that we get all of the data that we need for this scoring process. And part of where we are trying to build in a little bit of flexibility is with some of these qualitative factors for project benefit. So even if a project is relatively conceptual in nature, we think that we can still use this using whatever limited amount of information we have about the project that, again, may be implemented in 2040 or 2045, and at least provide some type of written justification for why we're giving it a certain score for the benefit that it's likely to achieve.
Okay, thank you.
This is Ian again. Thanks to Adam for making the presentation. As you can see, this is one part of what I was referring to earlier of developing the LRTP in blocks, bringing each block to you, and then taking your input before moving to the next block. I would encourage anyone who's here today to please email us additional questions or comments or suggested improvements in the next week or two as we continue to work on this. And we can certainly address those questions and build answers into our next presentation of this roadway improvement prioritization methodology. And that will help us to improve it as we go along.
All right. Well, if there's no other comments from the group, yeah, thank you, Adam and Ian, for putting this together. I think we're kind of starting moving in the right direction here with incorporating some more robust methodology for our LRTP. So I appreciate the effort there. I guess next we'll move into item 6G, which is the tip updates from Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. So the first resolution, 21-16, is approving the FY 21-24 rollover. As of the fall of 2019, the statewide transportation improvement plan was sort of put on pause so that they could update it to the next 4 fiscal years. So moving it from 2018 to 2021 to 2021 to 2024. And during this time, our local MPO tip could be updated through amendments. And so all of these project UPC blocks that are attached are previously voted on and approved. However, we're just transitioning them from one set of years to the next set of years. And we brought this to the committee last month, so we are now just seeking approval of this item. I can answer any questions.
All right, well, hearing no questions from the group, this is Alex. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve Resolution 2116.
Second. I don't know if I can second from the same locality.
Second from Paul if that's an issue.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving Resolution 2116, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, resolution passes. Jordan, if you want to go over Resolution 2117 for us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the an amendment to the TIP. So VDOT came to us in the last few months with a few amendments that they had for 3 UPCs with updated information. So this amendment adds and adjusts funding in order to advance these 3 UPC projects. And all of these projects did meet air quality conformity as they either were approved in May 2020 when we did the 21-24 TIP, or they are not regionally significant. So this is just to change and add some of the funding so that these projects can move forward in our TIP. And I can answer any questions that we have about these projects if needed.
All right, well, hearing no questions, I'd like to go ahead, as Alex again, make a motion to approve Resolution 2117.
Second from Paul from Spotsylvania.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of Resolution 2117, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, resolution passes. Next will be item 6H, which is a Transportation Alternatives Program update from Carrie.
Good morning. This is just a reminder that 2021 is a Transportation Alternatives application year, and it's time to start thinking about your potential candidate projects. We don't have any information, unfortunately, about funding yet. Hopefully that will be soon, but the portal will be open around May 17. Pre-applications will be due on July 1st, and the final application deadline will be October 1st. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Carrie, for that update. Next will be item 6I, which is the DRPT Technical Assistance Grant application. Ian?
Thanks very much, Alex. We just want to apprise you of the application that we're putting in. We're only putting in one application from the FAMPO staff for a DRPT Technical Assistance Grant. It's a study that we're proposing to look at east-west mobility and interregional connectivity. One of the concerns behind this is my own, which is that a ton of work is going into north-south mobility through our region, with the I-95 upgrade, the VRE improvements that are going to be rolled out over the next 10 years, and some more limited upgrades to Route 1, but less attention is being paid to east-west mobility. So we're looking at a 2-phase study to try and address that. Phase 1, transit and bike ped, looking at major east-west corridors, in the interconnection of transit modes and other modes, overall regional mobility versus a single corridor. We're not studying one particular corridor. You'll remember the Lafayette Boulevard study did a job of assessing that whole corridor. This is more looking at the region and mobility east-west through the region and connecting to these other modes. So we're identifying current and future shortcomings on our network of transit and looking at bottlenecks that are in the system and proposing a set of solutions or infrastructure or system improvements that would help move people to the major north-south corridors. We'll then look at a phase 2 later, which will be a detailed east-west roadway mobility study focusing on the road aspects of that. We just wanted to bring you just the fact that we're making this application and what exactly it is about if you see the application going in and comments on it. So this is the application we're putting in. It's going in today, and it's the only one that we're putting in this round for DRPT technical assistance.
Yeah, Ian, this is Paul. I had a couple questions. What's the deadline that basically you need to submit this application?
So Paul, the application has to go in today. We have got your correspondence in terms of a particular corridor that you're interested in, and we have included that in our thinking in terms of what particular corridors need to be studied for this particular study.
So it's like kind of with this type of application in the past, it normally needed like a resolution of support, in this case maybe from GWRC. Is that something you have, or is that something you would get in the future?
Hi, Paul. So we've got 2 letters of support from OmniRide and from Fred. And the application, as far as I'm aware, allows us to put a resolution from, say, GWRC at a later date. It's not required to go in with the application on the application deadline, which is today.
And I guess like with the matching funds, where would those come from?
So at this stage, we're looking at 5303 funding, and then there's a small local match component.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chair, I don't think that there's a particular action required from this committee, but we just brought this to your attention so that you know exactly what we're applying for and what we're doing.
All right, yeah, thank you for that update, Ian. If there's no further questions, I guess we can move on to our last item, 6J, which is the FAMPO 2021 meeting calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Leah again. Yes, before you is the draft meeting schedule for the 2021 calendar year, showing changes agreed upon at last month's meeting. It's in line with the usual schedule where TAC meets monthly every first Monday at 9:30 a.m., currently 100% virtual. And that's every first Monday unless there's a holiday. Recently, the policy committee moved their summer from August to July, and the calendar has been updated to reflect this, so that TAC will not meet in July and reconvenes in August on the 2nd, the first meeting in the FY 2022 year, with a potential new slate of officers. So while a vote is not required on this, reschedule or confirmation of this schedule change, specifically for the summer break, is recommended, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
I know this is Ian again, Alex. I know that Leah's sound is breaking up today, but the change for July and August was requested by the policy committee at their meeting last week. They would prefer to meet in August instead of in July, if you didn't hear what Leah was saying.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I think that's perfectly acceptable to me. Or anyone else from the committee have any issues with taking our break in July?
No.
Okay, I think we're safe to assume to move forward with the calendar as presented then.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
All right, then we'll move on to item number 7, which is correspondence. I don't know if we have any correspondence to discuss or review.
Mr. Chair, there's none that I'm particularly aware of that we needed to bring to the TAC at this stage.
All right, thanks. With that, then we'll move on to number 8, staff reports.
Mr. Chair, just to point out, I can't remember whether I raised this at our last meeting, but just if I haven't done so, we have not in January renewed the contracts for our interns, and we have appointed Matthew Lahane as a full-time planner. He was a part-time and temporary staff member. He is now a full-time planner at FAMPO, and we've made that appointment. And while I've got the floor, if I could just make a comment that we know that Eric from the city of Fredericksburg has retired. Just to mention that we have from FAMPO a certificate thanking him for his many, many years of service. We have had the certificate framed and we're going to present it to him. Unfortunately, he's not available for the meeting today, so we aren't able to present it to him at this particular meeting. But we have had a nice certificate drawn up and framed, and we'll be delivering it to him. We just want to congratulate him on his retirement and his many, many years of service and thank him for those years of service. And we just thought it appropriate to mention it at the TAC meeting today as well.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks, Ian, for kind of putting that together for Eric there. Certainly had a lot of years of experience working with this committee, that's for sure. All right, well, I guess that takes us to number 9, which is member reports. Any localities have any, or jurisdictions have some reports to give?
Hey, Alex, it's Jason. I just have one item of note for members of the TAC to be aware of. We're tracking pretty closely, maybe others on here are also aware about the House Bill 1910, I believe it is off the top of my head, that Delegate Cole has in to form, now it looks like, a regional transportation improvement committee. I sat in on, we've been reviewing it as a staff, and at the request of our board, have been pulling together different information about it. In general, Stafford has a lot of concerns about the nature of the committee and how it's proposed to be set up. In particular, it seems to be duplicative and perhaps even might undercut some of the existing programs and authority that FAMPO and GWRC have with regards to regional transportation planning efforts and funding. So I just wanted to make everybody else aware of that. It's kind of been moving fast in the General Assembly, or at least I believe it's going to committee in the next day or two. Just wanted to make everyone else aware of that, as it could have a significant impact on everybody in Planning District 16.
Mr. Chair,
this is Paul.
Go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry.
Jason, could you send us the information you have regarding House Bill 1910?
Yeah, sure. We can send that over.
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie Jackson from Fred. I just have 2 quick items. One just for TAC members that have been engaged in our process and looking at, and of course, since PRTC OmniRide is on the phone, we are going to connect with the jurisdictions and related partners regarding evaluating our options for seeking some of the 5307 van pool funds again. So I just wanted you to have a heads up as a body as we contact you, because we want to, again, of course, figure out ways to reduce the local share for our jurisdictions and advanced projects. So I just wanted to give the group a heads up on that. And the other piece, a less formal but more exciting news, is the Fred's new website is up. So rodfred.com, if you have not seen it yet. If you've seen our old website, you know the new one is a significant improvement. We'll still be making updates and changes, but just wanted to let you know that we actually have a new website, and it is definitely more amazing than the old one. Thank you for bringing that up, but it should be more user-friendly. It provides updates real time. We had some service impacts yesterday and today. So all the information is there. It will be continuously updated and improved, but just wanted to let everybody know that that information is there, especially those who are looking for things like our transit development plan and other documents that you may need for studies or reports. A lot of that content is now on our website. Thank you.
Yeah, Alex, this is Paul. I just had kind of one other comment. We received an email from VDOT on a Rails to Trails funding opportunity, and basically we forwarded that information to Ian, Adam, and Carrie this morning. But it appears there may be some funding coming through FAMPO with that. I said there may also be some funding that VDOT has with that. So I'll say if that funding is in fact there, that's something we would like to talk about at the next TAC meeting.
Okay, certainly. All right, well, if there's no other reports from members, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to adjourn the TAC committee meeting.
So moved. Or second.
All right, and all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, well then, thank you everyone, and we'll see you on March 1st at 9:30 for our next TAC meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, have a good day.